All right, we are straight up at 6 o'clock. Hello, everyone. Let me check in with staff and see if we are ready to go to begin our meeting tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. We are ready to go.
Excellent. Well, with that, I'd love to welcome everybody to our regular joint meeting of the Cotati City Council and the successor agency to the former Cotati Community Redevelopment Agency for Tuesday, October 11th, 2022. And I'd like to jump next to ask the city clerk if we could have a roll call of council members present, please.
Councilmember Sparks.
Here.
Councilmember Ford.
Here.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
Here.
Mayor Landman.
And here. And if I could ask City Manager Obid if we could have an introduction to staff who are present tonight, please.
Sure. So tonight, attending the meeting, we have obviously myself, Damien Obid, City Manager. We have our City Attorney, John Bacher, with us tonight. And we have three of our department heads. We have Noah Houch, our Community Development Director. We also have Craig Scott, our Public Works Director, City Engineer. And we also have Angela Corder, our Director of Administrative Services. We also have Autumn Buss here tonight, who is one of our planners for one of the items on the agenda tonight. And then finally, Kevin Patterson, our Deputy City Clerk.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Obid. All right, with that, we're going to jump now to the Pledge of Allegiance. And I will invite anybody who would like to join me to please join in. I pledge allegiance,
to the flag,
United
States of America,
and to the
republic which it stands,
one nation,
under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice
for all.
Thank you. All right, that moves us next to approval of minutes and notice of waiving of reading of all resolutions and ordinances introduced and or adopted under this agenda. This is an action item. So first, I'll ask my colleagues in the council if they have any corrections or additions to the minutes as written. And I will slide over and see if I can see most of you at once, and I can tonight at this moment. That's good. Not seeing any hands there. So next, I will go to public comment for this, as this is an action item.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. Speaking to our attendees tonight, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon, or if you're dialing in, dial *9. Mayor Landman, that will end public comment.
All right, well then I will bring it back and see if I have a motion. This is minutes for the regular meeting of September 27th, 2022. And I'll look to see if I have a motion in second. I see the Vice Mayor is already there. Thank you, Vice Mayor Harvey.
I'll second.
And a second from Councilmember Sparks. Thank you both. And if we could have a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Sparks.
Yes.
Councilmember Ford.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Mayor Landman.
And yes. All right, next this brings us to item 5, which is announcements. And I will ask everyone to bear with me while I have a few paragraphs of announcements that I need to read to everybody here tonight. And I'll begin with our meeting orientation for new viewers, attendees. In conformance with the Brown Act and the adopted City Council rules, the meeting agenda includes items labeled as action items, where the City Council will consider the item and citizens are afforded the opportunity to provide comments relevant to the item being discussed. The meeting agenda also includes a citizens business item, which is the designated place on the agenda where citizens have the right to say whatever they wish. The City Council may or may not choose to respond to comments as the government code allows. However, if the City Council declines to respond, it should not be perceived as giving credence to or agreeing with any statements that the City Council or its members believe are incorrect, misinformed, or purposefully biased. Next, Measure S supports police services, a variety of recreation programs for all ages, and the maintenance of our streets, parks, and public buildings. And you can see details regarding this on the web at CotatiCity.org. Next, citizens who are interested in receiving City of Cotati community alerts via text or email are encouraged to sign up with Nixle by downloading the Everbridge app from the iOS or Android App Store, or by simply texting your zip code 94931 to 888-777. And finally, like always, we do love to hear from you. So please feel free to contact the city at 707-792-4600 or at info@cotatiCity.org. Now, if you have a non-emergency issue after normal business hours, you can still contact us at 707-792-4611. And of course, if you have an emergency, please do contact 911. Continue to look for updates on the city's website and our social media channels available on Facebook, Instagram, Nixle, and Nextdoor. So next, we have a presentation tonight, and I believe we have a review of a draft city website. And I'm going to see if Mr. Obid's going to be doing our presentation on that.
Yes, Mayor, I'll do the overview.
Excellent.
Yeah. All right. So thank you, Mayor, members of the council. We've been working on an update and a refresh to the city website, and we're just about there with the draft. And I was just going to share my screen here so I can show you what that looks like right now. All right, so this is our homepage. I'm not going to literally go through every menu because that will take all night, but just to give you the flavor of the new website. So it's similar in a lot of ways to our existing website, where we have these top level menus, search bars, links to our social media, series of images here that rotate, as well as these icons, like these tiles, which are the main the main navigation features that we have on the homepage. So this is the same as our these icons here are the same as our current web page. It's just this one on the far right that is that's new. So projects in progress has been elevated to this homepage, and this is both development projects or public works projects. So oftentimes we get questions about, what project is this that's going on in town? This is an easy way to find them without having to go through the menus to find them in planning or in engineering. Below that, we have just latest news. So it scrolls on the 3 latest, and you also can see past stories. And then we have a new calendar, which is more functional. This is a general calendar. So this includes all stuff, all events. And then these would be the city council or planning commission or board meetings only, and recreation events only. So you can filter it by those 3 ways. And then you can obviously learn more about each one of these if you click through on them. And then, look at that at the bottom. There you guys are. So these are the council members, and then you can click through and it takes you to the respective bios for each of the council members. And then, normal kind of footer stuff at the bottom. This view we're looking at right now is a normal like desktop computer view. You can also, here, let me close this one down. And then this is what our current page looks like. So it's so you can see very similar in format, but the calendar and the new page is much more functional, and it has just some better navigation features than our current page. So we all right. So this is the desktop view, but if you take it down to a mobile size, you can see what it would look like if you looked at it on your phone or a mobile device. So this is what it looks like in the mobile view. So anyway, it's built in for full view and all types of devices, full desktop view, iPad, scale, or mobile phone device. So it should be easy to use and navigate in any one of those platforms. And then also, these are all fully ADA accessible. So they have all the features you need to make them fully accessible to meet all the ADA standards. And with that, so it's just the end of kind of see what it looks like if you looked at it on your phone. So anyway, with that, I'd be, that's pretty much it. Be happy to answer any questions or take any feedback if you have any at this point.
Well, we'll jump back over to the council, see if there's any comment or questions, and we're going to lead off tonight with Councilmember Sparks.
Thank you. I just had two questions. First of all, the council member pages, it used to be, if you clicked on there, our pictures were all squished up and the aspect ratio was really weird. Is that getting fixed or not? And then the other question is the way that the search bar functions behind the scenes getting any improvement, or is it just the same? Thank you.
Yeah. So I haven't fully tested the search bar to see. I know one on the current website is not that functional. And same with, I mean, it's okay, but it's not great. And then the meeting portal that I think you're talking about, that search bar is really not that great at all. And I will say that, and that's where the images are that you're referring to, that are, you know, where they're stretched and they don't fit right. We can, I'll have staff look at that to see if we can edit the photos differently so that they fit in that space correctly. But, you know, more medium or longer term, we're looking at also potentially some different legislative platforms that might be more functional in terms of the searching in particular. So.
All right, very good. I'm going to jump to the Vice Mayor. Go ahead, Vice Mayor Harvey.
I would second what Councilmember Sparks said about the search. The search, I try many different ways sometimes to find things, and the search is kind of clunky. So I'm hoping that that's new and improved, because it's not as robust as I think that it could be. So hopefully that will get better. So, but other than that, I love the pictures and the look of it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I will say too, you know, when we look at the website usage metrics, you know, we try to highlight the things that people go to. I mean, these things are by far the most common things that people come to our website for. And then in the how do I, we try to, you know, put the most sort of second or common things that people are looking for. So we'll do some more testing on the search bar, but just generally speaking, in terms of design, we try to, you know, surface those things so that they're more available around the homepage without a lot of clicks.
Very good. Councilmember Ford.
Real quick, what's the anticipated switchover date?
Right now, we're looking at going live on this Friday. Yeah. So there's some, like, you know, DNS server stuff that we need to switch over. So there may be like a 15-minute or so outage when browsers can't find the right website, but we picked a low use day, so hopefully it's pretty unnoticeable to most people.
So just to follow up, there are some links in the new site that still link back to pages in the old site. Will those get fixed by Friday?
Yeah, we've been going through getting all these little things cleaned up. But if there's specific things, please forward them to me. That way, we can make sure I catch them all. But they should. We have been actively going through it every day, testing it and finding stuff that needs a little cleanup here and there.
Okay. Oh, I see. Some of them go to the IQM2, which is the site you were talking about, the meeting site. That's not changing.
No, there's
Okay.
some links that go to third party sites like the
Okay.
portal, which is the IQM2, or ClearGov for projects.
Okay. Thanks.
Good. Well, I've noticed the aspect ratio problem, but I've never said anything because I'm not sure if I'll wind up looking better or worse when you fix it. So it may be completely immaterial to me, but I will say, all kidding aside, that I think this really isn't quite an improvement in initial appearance and ability to navigate just landing on it. It's similar to the previous one and works well, but I think this design has the ability to work well both in desktop use, which some of us still like to use, as well as working well in mobile format. So I think that's going to be quite a benefit. So I wish you good luck on this switch over. My experience is no new website goes live without at least a couple of small bugs. So I hope that's the worst you have to deal with. And I wish you all good luck with that. And if we see anything, we'll certainly let you know.
Yeah, thank you. Please do.
So since we've shown this and talked a bit about it, it's not listed as an action item, but I'd like to go to public comment just in case the public has any input, maybe something we've missed.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. Speaking to our attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon. Marjorie Crump Shears, please go ahead.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Damien, what a beautiful look. Love it, love it, love it. I want to encourage, however, in any of the photographs that accompany our city website, that we show the diversity of the population in our city. Please. Love seeing the children. They are adorable. And the adults are okay too. But we are a mixed group, and I think it is important to show that. So good work, and let's include more color in the photographs. Thank you.
Kay Rivers, please go ahead.
So, hi. I just wanted to make the quick comment that I also think it's absolutely beautiful. I am hoping that the city council pages in the future will be able to have some type of like running news stream or something where we can like post where we're going to be if people want to meet us places or that type of thing. Or, you know, upcoming meetings outside of the regular city council meetings that people might want to come to. And I just think it would be really great if we had some flexibility on the individual pages, that they weren't just static. Thank you.
Mayor Landman, that will end public comment.
All right, thank you. So we will bring it back. Let's see. So this item was merely a review and a presentation. No action is being taken. So this brings us to item number 7 tonight, which is approval of the final agenda. Again, an action item. So I will check with the city manager and see if we have any changes to the calendar tonight.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'm proposing that we make one change under public hearing, item 11A, which is otherwise known as the Ag Ordinance, Urban Ag Ordinance. After publication, we noticed that the ordinance unintentionally omitted the use in the proposed zoning code amendment. So I recommend that the council not hear this item tonight. Staff will correct the omission and bring it back at a future city council meeting.
Okay, yeah, I think we probably kind of need to do that. First, I'll check. I see a hand up from one of my colleagues. So I'll go to Vice Mayor Harvey.
Thank you. Damien, I know extended notifications were made of tonight being the hearing on this. Will those be redone so that folks will have the opportunity to participate in the public hearing?
Yeah, when it comes back, it'll all be renoticed, and yeah, it'll be renoticed. And the people that we know of that are interested in this item, we reach out to them as well.
Okay.
No.
So even the folks that got snail mail mailings, those will go out again? I know some of those went out.
Yeah, I don't believe any public, like direct mailings to people went out. It was more email noticing to people that are interested. And the newspaper notice is the public hearing notices.
Actually, can I step in really quick, Damien?
Yeah.
We noticed this public hearing for the urban agriculture ordinance to all of the addresses in the rural residential and the residential very low density zones. As you know, we had committed to doing that. I keep an email list of folks who have contacted us or who have spoken at the past meetings where we have their email addresses, and I also notify them directly as well. So when this item comes back before the council, we will redo all of that noticing.
Okay, that's all that I was asking for, because I know that some folks in the rural area did receive snail mail notices, and just wanted to be sure that that opportunity was there again. So thank you for that, Anna.
All right, I'm not seeing any further hands, so I just want to confirm we will then table public hearing 11A until it's ready to be brought back. So since we won't be discussing this or taking action on it, but I know I may have some people here tonight that wish to comment. So if anybody wishes to comment us, they're certainly welcome to during the public comment portion of this approval of the final agenda, since we made that change, or during public comment, which is the next agenda item. So with that segue, I'll go to public comment and see if anybody has anything they wish to share on this.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. If you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon. Mayor Landman, that will end public comment.
All right, thank you. And again, my apologies to anybody that might have been here or following this. These things happen rarely, but they do happen occasionally. And it's certainly important to do it right rather than to do it and find that you've made a mistake in something, that you've made an ordinance out of. We would certainly like to avoid that, I know. So with that, then we are at approval of the final agenda. This is an action item, even though it is somewhat pro forma. So I'll ask if I can have a motion in a second.
Move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
Thank you, Council Members Ford and Vice Mayor Harvey. If we could have a roll call vote in that, please.
Councilmember Sparks,
Yes.
Councilmember Ford,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Mayor Landman.
And that's a yes. So that moves us then to item 8, which is citizens' business and public comment for consent calendar items. And I do have something to read once again, and that is that any member of the public wishing to speak to the council on any items listed on the consent calendar or any matters not listed on the agenda that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council may do so at this time. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the council is not allowed to consider issues or take action on any item that is not listed on the agenda during this period. Pursuant to City Council Policy 2021-01, comments of any member of the public are normally restricted to a total of 3 minutes in length per person and for matters not on the agenda, and a total of 3 minutes per person in length for any and all items on the consent calendar. And as always, the mayor may extend the time limit for a reasonable time where a disability accommodation has been requested. So with that, let's open public business and see if we have citizens business and see if we have any comments on that or the consent calendar.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. Speaking to our attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon. Tammy, please go ahead. Tammy, you have the floor.
It doesn't look like she has talking enabled.
Yeah, not seeing a microphone connection. We'll give Tammy a minute to see if she can resolve this. If not, perhaps we can go to our next person, and then we'll see if we can come back to Tammy and give her the opportunity to speak.
That is the only public comment, the only raised hand at this time. If Tammy can hear us, we're getting a notification on our side that your version of Zoom is an older one, and so unfortunately, it's not allowing us. It's not allowing your microphone to activate. So at this time, with no other public comment, that will end public comment.
All right. Technology is a wonderful thing, but it certainly can be regrettable at times as well.
Mayor Len, might we have the clerk read out the phone number so that she could phone in her comment?
That's a very good suggestion. Why don't we take a moment and do that? Thank you, Mr. Ford.
Yes, thank you. Let me. So it can be any one of the following phone numbers that are listed on the front page of the agenda. I'll read out the first one here in the interest of not reading 7 phone numbers. But the first one is area code 669-900-6833. And you can call that and then enter the meeting ID and the passcode. And those are all found on the front page of the agenda, which can be found at cotadicity.org. Thank you.
And Mr. Patterson, I'm going to ask you to repeat that email, or excuse me, that phone number one more time slowly, as well as sharing the information you mentioned, just to make it easier for this person if they're trying to frantically jot this down.
Absolutely. We'll start with the phone number. That is area code 669-900-6833. And once you call that number, you'll enter the ID and the passcode. The ID is 866-996-8216. And the passcode is 796477. And actually, we do have a phone listener in the attendees at this time, so we will give that person permission to unmute and make the public comment.
Thank you. Perfect.
The last 4 digits on the phone number are 7749. You have the floor.
Kevin, do you want to tell them how to unmute? They may not be familiar with how to unmute the phone.
Yes, I believe in the when you call the phone number, there should be instructions on how to unmute. Those will play on the phone.
There we go.
I believe they are unmuted.
Hello, Tammy. If this is you, you're unmuted, and let's see if we can hear you.
Can you hear me now? Oh,
Yes.
Okay, my name is Tammy Eaton, and I am the director and lead teacher at Sandy Loam. We provide outdoor farm and garden curriculum for children from ages 3 to 10. We see around 100 children a month here at the ranch. In partnership with the city, we provide monthly walking field trips for local preschoolers, early release day enrichment for elementary school children, summer camps, and fun and engaging events for families. We use the ranch house and the kitchen for education and the educational garden, as well as the chicken flock in our educational programming. I know that the existence of our rooster is up for discussion, and I wanted to take this opportunity to give my input on why RJ is an important part of our flock and our educational program. Having the roosters teaches the children who visit the ranch about a complete flock and their role in it. It wouldn't be complete education to teach the children about chickens without having a rooster. They can see the differences in the hens and the roosters and observe his behavior and learn about his role in the flock. Roosters complete the natural order of the flock. The hens rely on them for protection. The roosters will guard the hens from predators, but by keeping them together and sounding an alarm if one approaches. They also defend them bodily against an attacker. And here on the ranch, we have fox, possums, skunks, raccoons, cats, and raptors. They also will break up hen fights and find food to give to the hens. It opens the discussion up with the public as well about hatching chickens or buying them at a store and planning ahead in case they were to get a rooster. It's a perfect opportunity to let them know about the illegal dumping of roosters at Pete's and the responsibility that they take on in starting a flock. Hens who have been around the rooster their whole lives will also take on the role of the rooster if the rooster is removed, and this includes crowing. Therefore, removing the rooster will not alleviate the issue of crowing. It will just be taken over by the hens. RJ is a huge part of our flock and our program, and we would not be the only ones who would be devastated to see him go if we had to rehome him. The children who visit our ranch would also be heartbroken. I hope that you take these points into consideration when making your votes. Thank you.
All right, Kevin, I'll check and see if we have any other public comment at this point or consent calendar comments.
There are no further hands at this time, so Mayor Landman, that will end public comment.
All right, well, I'll just briefly compliment Tammy. I think she made the case much easier for the rooster by letting us know his name is RJ. Makes it a lot harder to have a problem when you know the animal's name. So thank you for that. So we're going to move on, and we have a consent calendar to deal with. We have 3 items, A through C, on the consent calendar tonight. And I'll ask first if any council member wishes to pull any item that's on the agenda, on the consent calendar. And I'm not seeing any hands jump up. If not, then I will look for a motion, followed by a roll call.
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
So we have a motion from the Vice Mayor and a second from Councilmember Sparks. If we could go to a roll call vote for consent, please.
Councilmember Sparks,
Yes.
Councilmember Ford,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Mayor Landman.
And yes. Thank you, everybody. So this brings us to item 10, which is direction on future agenda items. And I'll just ask my colleagues if there's any direction tonight for future agenda items. And not seeing any this particular meeting, we will move forward then to item 11, public hearings. And we'll jump right to 11B. And this is introduction of an ordinance to amend the city's land use code to create a VRNF design standard for multifamily, mixed use, and other private developments. And I'll ask if we can have our staff presentation and see if I've learned to pronounce that correctly or not.
Well, thank you, Mayor Landman. Good evening, members of the council. Yeah, I had to do a lot of research, and I think it's VRNF. I had to, I went to the Netherlands. I checked it out. So yes, you're all familiar with the concept because I know that you've seen it a few times before in front of you, and now it's come back. We're looking tonight at an ordinance to create these VRNF standards for new private multifamily and mixed use developments. So, and as you know, the VRNF is a concept that is from the Netherlands originally, and in that case, it's generally applied to public streets. Our proposal here is really concerned with the interior of private developments. And I'd like to share with you the definition that we are working with. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Can I have the next slide, please? Then you can follow along. And I have some nice pictures. Here we go. So down at the bottom of this slide here, you'll see that this is a definition that we're using in the proposed ordinance, and I'll just read it to you here. A VRNF is an internal driveway within a development used as a multimodal, multi-use shared space where priority is given to pedestrians and bicycles. Motor vehicles are considered guests in a VRNF, and as such are subject to traffic calming and reduced speed limits in order to force drivers to reduce travel speeds and drive with caution so that all users feel welcome and safe. Next slide, please. So going through the background, which you'll be familiar with, we began our discussions regarding VRNFs in May of last year, where the VRNF was included as one of the options to meet the open space requirement in the proposed multifamily objective design standards. In June, the Planning Commission voted to recommend those standards, including the VRNF option, to the council. And in August and September of last year, the council had a couple of different public hearings to discuss those objective design standards. And in September, decided that the Wooners was such a compelling concept that the council was interested in taking it out of the multi-family objective design standards and applying it on its own to multifamily projects, and asked staff to work on an ordinance, which accordingly they did. Next slide, please. And so that that proposed ordinance version 1 came to the Planning Commission in November, and the Planning Commission recommended it to the council. And in December, you all took a look at what was proposed and had a number of suggestions and revisions and room for improvement, and asked staff to come back to work on that again. And so that brings us to this year. We have staff has reviewed the ordinance, made changes in response to your direction. And in September, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on the new draft and voted to recommend that to you for adoption. They have a couple of minor changes that they asked to be included, which we've incorporated, and also asked the council to have some additional discussion on the topic of the transition zone, which is the area between a public street and the actual entrance or exit from a Wooners. And I will get into that that commentary from the Planning Commission a little bit later. Next slide, please. So stepping back to the direction that was given to staff by the council last December, there were three key concepts. One was to define the term internal driveway and require that all qualifying internal driveways within a development are candidates for Wooners. Secondly, to remove the requirement of the minimum 100 square feet of Wooners per dwelling unit in favor of design standards that would maximize the amount of Wooners space in each new development. And finally, to ensure that Wooners are not placed on driveways that accommodate heavy motor vehicle circulation from the perspective of pedestrian and bicycle safety. Next slide, please. And even stepping back a little further, and you're all old hands at the Wooners, but just to review for folks who might want a refresher, the Wooners really incorporates sort of 4 primary principles: visible entrances, so that the users of a Wooners really know that they have entered a multimodal space. And you can see on the right-hand side there, the little sign there, which is kind of iconic of the Wooners as a shared space. Physical barriers to slow traffic down. And here you can see that there's sort of a meander and landscaping there to kind of slow cars down a little bit. It's a shared and paved space. Continuous paving without curb breaks, and landscaping and street furniture are typically present in a Wooners as well for comfort of the users. Next slide, please. And here's another example, kind of looking down from above, and here you can see some other aspects that are common in a Wooners. One is the meandering travel way to slow down motor vehicles, plenty of landscaping, the use of parking as traffic calming. Right, so you can see there's a number of cars parked in that section there of the roadway, street furniture and lighting. And really the sort of the sum result of all of this is the creation of a series of outdoor living rooms, essentially, that are usable by nearby residents. Next slide, please. And one last example, just because it's so lovely. Of course, this one doesn't have the meander, but you can see how narrow that street is. This is obviously not the United States. This is in Europe somewhere. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so getting into the big changes from what we've seen, what you saw last December. So changes based on your direction. We have in this new version added the definition of internal driveway, which is a private driveway, access way, driving aisle, street, lane or alley within a single development that provides motor vehicular access to that development's structures, parking areas, and other features or amenities. So really, it's a pretty broad definition. Further, we have included that all internal driveways are candidates for WUNRFs, with the goal of maximizing the amount of WUNRF space within a given development. So previously, the proposed standard was a minimum of 100 square feet per dwelling unit. We heard pretty clearly from the council that might create some unintended consequences in terms of too much pavement or maybe not enough WUNRF. Maybe the developers would try to hit that 100 square feet and no more. So we've revamped the standards to really go for just maximizing the amount of WUNRF within the development, and all of the design standards within the ordinance kind of feed into that. Further, no WUNRFs will be placed on driveways with heavy traffic, and we're defining that as more than 100 motor vehicle trips during the evening peak hour. And finally, the design should reduce the occurrence of those heavy traffic driveways and cut through traffic through a development and thereby maximize the opportunities for WUNRF. So we're really going to be kind of challenging developers to design superior projects that will create these WUNRF spaces. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I'm just going to step through the actual standards, cribbing from the language of the ordinance itself. Each WUNRF will be required to feature a clear and distinctive entrance and exit. And that will include signage, a change in the pavement surfacing, traffic calming features to slow down the traffic as they enter. I want to note that permeable surfacing of the WUNRF is okay. There's been some discussion about whether the WUNRF might drive further paving or more asphalt. And I wanted to clarify that permeable paving is called out as an option within the ordinance if a developer wanted to go that way. Each WUNRF will require this transition zone, which is 20 feet from a standard roadway between the WUNRF entry and the intersection with the street. So for an arterial, that's 60 feet. And so we're talking about Old Redwood Highway, 116 and East Cotati are essentially the arterials in Cotati. And so the WUNRF would be required to not begin until at least 60 feet from those kind of streets. And that allows the cars that are entering to reduce their speed, to stack vehicles in the event that there's some sort of an obstruction in the WUNRF, child's fallen off its bicycle or something, and to allow for emergency vehicle access into the WUNRF. The speed limit would be posted at 8 miles per hour in each WUNRF. One or two-way traffic would be a possibility depending on the design. Each WUNRF would need to be in close proximity to the entrances to the residential units and to common areas within the community to the extent possible. Traffic calming measures would be placed no less than 100 feet apart, and previously that was 160 feet. So we're pushing the livability here by suggesting the placement of traffic calming at 100 feet apart instead, a little closer. The minimum length of a WUNRF will be 60 feet in order to incorporate all of those different pieces that are required. Previously, a maximum length was proposed, but we've eliminated that in looking at all of the different design standards that are proposed. What will probably happen, we believe, is that the design will dictate how lengthy the WUNRF can be. Okay, so we're not so concerned about the maximum length at this point. Okay, next slide, please. The width of a WUNRF may vary, however, with the minimum motor vehicle travel at space at 13 feet. So minimum 13 feet for the cars to pass through. And we're newly added the idea of having vehicle passing bays so that in the case of a two-way WUNRF, the roadway can be, or the vehicle travel space can be narrower because there'll be these passing bays for cars to be able to get by each other, and they won't necessarily need to pass side by side at all points in the WUNRF. Each WUNRF will incorporate seating, landscaping, decorative pavement, and other pedestrian and decorative amenities along the full length and eliminate the continuous curb. We're also adding the requirement that seating be placed at least 100 feet, every 100 feet within the WUNRF. Bicycle parking will be provided within the WUNRF to code and per the bike ped plan. An intermittent motor vehicle parking within the WUNRF is also permitted, needs to be placed at least 35 feet from the entrances in order to avoid any conflicts with vehicles entering into the WUNRF space with a car that's trying to park. And as always, emergency vehicle access will need to be approved by the fire marshal for each development. Next slide, please. So the Planning Commission had a good discussion about these standards, and they did recommend council approval. They requested specifically two minor changes, which I've included in the draft ordinance that's before you tonight. One was the addition of the word lane to the definition of internal driveway, just to make sure that we didn't miss anything in that definition. So we're expanding on that idea of a driveway, access way, driving aisle, street, or alley, and we're including lane. Previously, we had the 8-mile-per-hour speed limit applying to motor vehicles and bicycles. It was pointed out by the commissioners that it is entirely possible that some wheeled vehicles besides those could also go that fast. And so we are applying the speed limit to any wheeled vehicle or device within the WUNRF for safety purposes. In addition, the Planning Commission raised the concern that the proposed 60-foot transition zone from arterials might be excessive, and that it might result in additional pavement that would be unnecessary. Otherwise, reduced area of WUNRF overall, and the opportunity for drivers to actually accelerate, so that after making the turn off of the arterial, seeing a 60-foot distance in front of them, they might actually accelerate, which obviously is not desirable. In discussing it afterwards, so the Planning Commission requested that the council discuss this. Okay. In talking about it afterward, the staff is continuing to support the 60-foot standard, believing that it gives drivers the time to slow down. It really allows important vehicle stacking so that we don't have vehicles sticking back out into the arterial, right, and blocking the sidewalk or the vehicle travel lanes, and to facilitate the emergency vehicle access into the WUNRF, the fire truck. But to clarify the nature of that transition zone, we revised the draft ordinance following the meeting with the Planning Commission to include, to stipulate that the transition zone needs to be designed to slow down the traffic and to alert drivers to the upcoming WUNRF. So signage will be included in that transition zone, and the transition zone itself will still be narrowed with landscaping or other traffic calming measures to help drivers know they should not be accelerating as they're approaching the WUNRF. So that is our take on it, and we're hoping the council will have some discussion about that if they're interested in revisiting that standard. Next slide, please. That brings me to our recommendation. The Planning Commission and the Community Development Department recommend that the City Council introduce an ordinance that would allow for the development and regulation of WUNRFs as part of certain new private development projects. And with that, I am available to answer your questions.
Well, let's jump right over. Thank you, first of all, for that. And we'll see if we have any questions right off the bat from the council. I'm not seeing any hands jump up. I'm seeing faces deep in thought. So while they're doing that, I do have one question for you, Ms. Buzz. Internal driveways that accommodate heavy motor vehicular circulation being defined as more than 100 motor vehicle trips during the afternoon or the evening peak hour. I could certainly see why we would want to have them not subject to the WUNRF requirement. I'm curious, can you give me any examples just offhand of any internal driveways that match or exceed that? I'm having a hard time picturing an internal driveway for a living area with that many cars, but that's, I've never really looked at it. Do we have any examples of that? Is that something we might typically even see come to us in a design?
I don't think it's that likely. I do have one to share with you. Let me see if I can find it here. So so that standard it's a common standard I've seen for other WUNRFs. It shows up, you know, if you do the WUNRF reading, there's some folks who study this, Bruce Appleyard and I forget the first name, another guy, Mr. Cox. And they set forth that standard in their literature review of WUNRFs. Just as an example, the Katati Village project, which is proposed at 177 units of housing. The traffic study indicates that that project will generate 79 trips, motor vehicle trips per day. And so, you know, 177 units is a pretty good size project. And, you know, it is not likely, I think, that we would see projects that would be significantly larger than that would be generating that 100 vehicular trips a day. And in fact, it could likely be less. And one of the things that, you know, that we're really looking at with this too, is putting the onus back on the developer to design a project such that there's minimal traffic that would need to be diverted onto a driveway that becomes a WUNRF. You know, to really design the project in a creative way to, you know, to spread the traffic out, perhaps.
Good. Well, I think that gives me a much better picture, and I agree with you. It seems likely it's something we're going to have to visit. I certainly hope we don't have a project of the nature that would trigger this here. That might be inappropriate for a town this small. But at any rate, that does make sense to have in there. So last question, I believe, for me, and I think we've been over this, so forgive me if I've already asked you about this, but it mentions that permeable pavement is allowed, and I get the reason for that. I'm supportive. Anything that helps recharge is a good thing. But I know I've learned in the last few years that there's a concern that permeable pavement tends to be something that gets clogged through just the natural dirt that applies over time and doesn't fulfill its function. And I noticed that all the WUNRFs are required to have landscaping. Would we not perhaps get better recharge just with the required landscaping, requiring it to be essentially little mini swales to facilitate recharge?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And I think that, again, the developer will come to us with a concept and we will work with the developer to figure out what's going to work best for that development and what fits best with our standards. So, you know, if we find that, you know, that maybe using the permeable pavers, if they're not committed to maintenance or, you know, or it's going to be problematic from a drainage perspective, you know, then we would certainly be encouraging them to go another way. And they'd be looking at the long haul too, in terms of maintenance.
Yep, and I would.
Yeah, and same with the landscaping. You know, if looking at our WELO standards, if you know there's something different that should be happening besides you know, permeable pavers and copious landscaping, you know, if swales might be more suited to that spot, then you know, I think that each project is going to kind of be its own animal in terms of how the WUNRF develops, and you know, we'll be applying the standards to come up with the best product in terms of.
And so we will be requiring maximal recharge where it's possible. And I'm comfortable myself personally, with whatever works out best for the project, but we will be seeing that. I understand that, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Well, I see a hand first from the Vice Mayor, and then I'll go to Councilmember Ford after that. So please go ahead, Vice Mayor Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor. Just as a follow-on to that question, is it considered part of the housing development responsibility for maintenance of these? They're not considered part of the public streets that we would have to have a different methodology if we were to use permeable paving. Mm-hmm. Is it, say, like a HOA, is it their responsibility for that maintenance?
Yes, absolutely. The WUNRFs may only be, through this ordinance, WUNRFs may only be on private property, and they will remain in private property, and the maintenance and, you know, ongoing upkeep will fall to the property owner.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't want to have to add another set of tools and things to for Public Works to have to maintain something, you know,
Right.
a little bit different than they're used to maintaining. So thank you for that. Thank you, Mayor.
Certainly. Councilmember Ford.
Thanks. Two questions. The first is about have you looked into ADA interactions with this kind of street that doesn't have a continuous curb, and how you sort of alert people to the fact that they're entering a, alert say sight impaired people to the fact that they're entering a vehicle travel space and things like that. I just don't know if the ADA implications have come up.
They have not. I mean, we do, we do need, when we look at each project, we need to look at ADA standards, particularly in relation to the building, the site plan in terms of accessibility throughout the parking areas and whatnot. So that would be the case in the WUNRF as well. As far as specific accessibility within the WUNRF, I think that the continuous curb could be helpful because then we won't have the need for curb cuts, and it should all be navigable, for those who might be in a chair or have mobility challenges. But as far as the notification and you're entering a different space, that's a very good question. And we may want to make sure that as we are working with developers on their applications, that we pay really special attention to what the application of the ADA standards is going to be in the WUNRF to make sure that we don't miss anything.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think that the people who make those yellow dot pavers are going to do well in WUNRFs. The second question was about the design to maximize WUNRF space, and that sounds to me like it brings up the same issues that the 100 square foot minimum did, which is, are we telling people to give more space to cars? Like that sounds like maximize WUNRF potentially at the expense of green open space or something like that. Like how does the proposed ordinance sort of handle maximize WUNRF space within whatever's required to park your cars, not create more space for cars?
Right. Well, so the WUNRF concept is applied to these internal driveways to the extent that a development has them. So, we may find that within certain developments, there is not even enough internal driveway available to create a WUNRF based on the standards, in which case the developer would need to do something else or would end up being exempt from these requirements. I also I want to point out that we do have that provision within the ordinance that if a developer proposes another concept that is comparable or even better, that they may propose that, and that could be approved as part of the approval process. And that would include parking all along the periphery, as you see in the co-housing, or clustering the parking, or some sort of some superior amount of open space that is available to residents within the project. So that if a WUNRF is not necessarily going to be, the best solution for a project, we may be able to work with a developer to come up with something else, and hope, it would certainly be, the staff's feeling that we wouldn't necessarily be creating WUNRFs just for the sake of paved areas within a development.
Great, thanks. Mayor, can I ask one more? I remembered one of them. It's so with the push for our standards to be more and more objective, say an affordable development comes along, and so are you confident that this design standard for WUNRF is objective enough that we can, I'm concerned about phrases like designed to achieve as much WUNRF as possible and things like that. So I just don't know if you've thought about how that fits with objectivity.
Mm-hmm. Well, within the ordinance, the standards are very specific. And so, and I did some exercises, or I took, some plans, even of some of the existing developments within the town, as well as some of the more recently proposed projects that are, have applied for permits, and kind of sketched it out and looked at what what might be achievable. And, we're feeling pretty confident that these standards can be applied in such a way that they're not, that they're clear enough to understand, clear enough to implement, that they can be considered to be objective.
Great, thanks.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ford. I'm not seeing any further questions at this time, so let's open the public hearing and see if we have any comment from the public.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. Speaking to our attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon. Jenny Blaker, please go ahead.
Hi, yes, thank you. Jenny Blaker here. Just 2 points. One would be, it seems it would be really important to prioritize the safety of children, pedestrians, bicyclists, skateboarders, wheelchairs, scooters, etc., whenever possible. So whatever design standards in terms of the entrance from the street can be made to ensure that those more vulnerable people are safe from cars. That seems to be the priority. And also I would echo Councilmember Ford's concern when I read the part about maximizing the amount of Wunerv space. I hope that doesn't in any way compete with or conflict with things like parks, gardens, children's play areas, and other safer, dedicated spaces where vehicles don't go at all. That's my comments. Thank you very much.
Neil Hancock, please go ahead.
Yes. Hello, Council. Am I coming through?
Yes.
I think thank you. Yes. So I, as a member of the the Planning Commission, I am sort of talking to some of the items that came up. I did check with Chair Lemus if she was okay in representing this. Particularly, I'd like to say that I think this is much better than where it was before. My own personal experience in riding around Cotati and moving around Cotati is we have some fairly narrow streets in sections of town. So we do have a history of having some very Wunerv-like features. And I think this tries to encapsulate that. But particularly off Materi Circle, if you walk around there, there's 2 access roads at the back that are 12 foot 6 inches. So they're actually less than the current standards for what we've got. So we've got some examples around Cotati of where we have the roads. This ordinance speaks specifically to multi-family homes. We're not talking about single family homes. And I certainly hope that anybody doing a design could use this as well in the future if they have single family homes to make it safer on the private streets that are there. On the 60-foot side from Ontario Highway, I would point out that we're going from, if we have a local road, we're going up to 25 miles an hour and we're having 20 feet transition zone. If we go a little bit higher, we're on an arterial road at 30 miles an hour or 35 miles an hour, and suddenly we're compensating for the vehicles. Yet again, we're compensating for the vehicles the vehicles may slow down or be allowed to slow down. And being in parts of town, there are confident drivers, let's say, who don't slow down for these locations. So I think we really want to design that will require the vehicle to slow down as it enters. Now, on Greenleaf Lane and also Cotati Lane, which do aggressively neck, they aren't strictly in the same sort of category as this, but they aggressively neck, and I measured one at 26 feet and the other at 30 feet. So, and I've posted pictures of this so you can actually calibrate as to what it looks like. It should be that for any sort of emergency access, it would be the same on any of these types of features. So we have these examples already in town, and I would ask you to consider reducing that entrance off an arterial to 30 feet instead of 16 feet. So good ordinance, good to see it happening. Thank you very much.
Lori Ann Barber, please go ahead.
Thank you. I want to, I guess, echo both a little bit of what Jenny said and Neil said. I'm glad to hear that well, first off, this is an exciting concept, and I'm glad that the city is taking this up and looking at it. So thank you for that. And but I also want to speak to the 60 feet. I spoke with Neil, and I tend to agree with him that seems maybe like an excessive amount of transition. Also because I think, East Cotati, we have a lot of housing on East Cotati, and so it seems like a likely place where there could be a window off the street. And 60 feet, anyway, I'm looking forward to the council discussing this because it seems to give more space to the cars again, as opposed to the pedestrians and children playing and all of that. So I think that's it. And I just wanted, again, to say, appreciate the city working on this and bringing something new that could be beneficial to residents. Thank you.
Mayor Landman, that will end public comment.
All right, in that case, let's close the public hearing and we'll bring it back to the council. So I'll open up to discussion. Obviously, we need to discuss the transition zone and see where we'd like to go with that. And anything else that the council, of course, would like to bring up. So let's see, the first hand I saw was Mr. Ford, followed by Laura. We'll go in that order, please.
Thank you, Mayor. So as you know, I like to copy other cities when I can find things. And it seems like we're kind of on the cutting edge in the US here in talking about this. So I appreciate Ms. Buss's work in putting all this together, because it seems like she doesn't have a lot of examples to work with. So I think it's important we get this right, because other people are likely to copy us. The transition zone, to me, I think the ordinance is great. The only thing I actually want to talk about is that 60-foot transition zone off of arterials. And I get the slowing the cars down argument, but I think that should primarily be accomplished by the method of getting off of the arterial. So most of those places along East Cotati where people turn off of East Cotati, for instance, they have to make a sharp right turn, and that slows them down. The one non-example of that is Metairie Circle, I think, has a very wide entry, and people can kind of pull in there just like they're exiting a freeway. Mm-hmm. So that's an example of a spot where I think the entrance was misdesigned and allowed cars to cross the sidewalk at too high a speed, and thus perhaps need 60 feet to slow down. But if the turn off of the arterial is properly designed, I think they're already way slowed down by the time they cross the sidewalk and are approaching, where this potential entrance would be. So I would like to see that number of 60 feet reduced to more like 40. But the stacking onto the arterial, if we're talking less than, I mean, even a large development, we're talking maybe 70, 79 trips an hour. That's not going to lead to a lot of stacking. So that doesn't worry me too much. And if we needed a little space for stacking, we could create turn lanes on the arterial to stack before you turn into the arterial. So, I mean, turn into the winner. So that's the only chunk of it that I would, raise an issue with. Otherwise, I think it's great. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Sparks.
Thank you. I'm really excited about this ordinance. I think I hope Councilmember Ford, I hope that is correct, that others will copy us. That would be a great outcome. I had just 3 comments. One really quick, I just found a typo on page 116 under the location of the Wooner. It says with the exception of, except for. It's just an extra exception in there. I share the concern that was expressed earlier about the maximum Wooner size. I'm sorry, the maximizing, the language about maximizing the size. I would love to see it say something, I'm not a great writer, but something along the lines of within paved areas in the project maximize the proportion of paved area that is a Wohnarf. Something like that, so that it's clear that we're not trying to maximize the overall amount of road and internal driveway. We're just, of the internal driveways that exist, we're maximizing how much of them are Wohnarf. And I'd love to hear staff's ideas if there's a workable way to do the language on that. And then my last comment was about the transition zone. It was interesting to bring up Metairie Circle because I was just looking at that myself and saw that 60 feet off of the arterial is on somebody's porch in their house. So you have to slow down within 60 feet to get into there, or you'll end up somebody's house. So I think I tend to agree that maybe 60 feet is a little excessive, and I would be comfortable with 40 feet instead. Thank you.
All right. Any comment from anybody else at this time? Vice Mayor Harvey.
Well, I'll throw my 2 cents worth in. Yeah, I'm kind of excited about this. Oftentimes, the projects, like the one on East Cotati Avenue and with like Lipton, it's kind of so sad to see just this pavement of, garages and pavement. This would have been so much nicer for those folks to have something like this. So I too am very excited. I agree with Councilmember Ford in particular on the streets off of East Cotati. I mean, all of those, they're pretty sharp right turns. So people generally have to stop when I think of all the apartment complexes and all the little developments like on, Bay Tree and Greenleaf and all of those. They're a real sharp turn, even like Breen and the condos down a little bit farther, closer to the train station. So I think that people generally coming off of those, because it's a sharp right angle, are already slowing down for that. So I like the suggestion made by Councilmember Ford of maybe going with something like 40 feet. So those are my 2 cents.
Right. Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'll expand by saying, yeah, I heard the term this was exciting, and I tend to agree with that. I'm going to thank Mr. Hausch and his staff for actually finding this and bringing it to us, and apologize for expanding into something much larger than he may have originally anticipated. But I think it's a good result, because I think, as Councilmember Ford pointed out, we may be on the cutting edge in this one. And I think it's that wonderful combination of something that makes a better living space for people, while at the same time, it can be done as relatively cost effectively as possible for a developer. So it works in both ways that everybody involved in building homes, cities and developers could look at it. It's a good thing. As far as the issue at hand, when I first heard that and looked at it, I had that first thought. 60 feet seemed like a long distance to me. And I was concerned about removing space from people for more space for cars. So I just went and did a little very rough Google searching as how long is the average car? How many can we stack in 60 feet? Now, obviously, I think everybody knows it's about roughly 15 feet is the average for a car that's planned. You could stack 4 cars pretty comfortably, probably. That doesn't seem to be a lot of cars if for some reason there's a holdup that's blocking access off the road. Then I looked at stopping distances. Okay, how long do you need to stop if you're coming at various speeds? Because we have a few different roads. You might be coming at different speeds off these. And I'm sure there's a lot of different standards. I'll just say this is a rough estimate, but several I read kind of coalesced in that 20 miles per hour, you need an average overall stopping distance of 40 feet. At 30, the overall stopping distance is 75 feet. And at 40 miles per hour, well, you need a lot more, 120. So that tells me that I thought that 60 might not be that far off, even though it sounded bad to me. And I want to be clear, we're not talking about making more space for cars here. We're talking about making this safe for kids and families and people to sit, because that's the difference here. I think when we go to look at existing multifamily homes in Cotati and assess this, it's different because these are areas which are designed and everybody's completely used to that this is roadway. You are pulling off the road, you are driving through this to a parking space or your home or a garage, something like that. There may be occasionally kids or passengers there, but the expectation, this is for the cars. Whereas we're dropping people into a whole new ball game. You're reducing to 8 miles per hour. This is a space that's primarily for people and kids to play out in the streets like many used to when I was much younger. And that's a different thing. So I could go along with the council at 40, but I'd have to hear from staff first to respond to some of the things we put forward and if they feel that 40 is workable. Because I was comfortable leaving it 60, although I understand the concerns why I'd want to minimize this. And the last thought I wanted to share, I hear the concern. I don't think we have a problem, though, about the language related to maximizing it. What we're saying, as I understand it, is we're asking you to maximize the vernus to the planned internal driveways, to the necessary driveways that are always in every single project, not to maximize the driveways in a project. And I'm not sure if there's any financial advantage that I can think of, at least readily offhand, for a developer to expand driveways. Especially Vernuff driveway is pretty cheap to make compared to some of the other things. I don't know. So just leave you with that thought. But we've all had a chance to come, and I wonder if staff could give us some feedback, Mr. Hausch and Ms. Buss, about the comments and see what you think might be workable, and maybe the council can see where we're at.
Thank you, Mayor.
Would you like to start?
Yeah. So I think that one of the challenges here is that we're looking at arterials when in reality perhaps East Cotati, not all arterials are built the same, right? So East Cotati may be substantially different from the experience that you have driving on Old Redwood Highway and 116. So that is definitely something worth considering, I think, in this case. I will say that we had looked at it in terms of the 60 feet as being maybe not 4 vehicles, maybe 3. I think our primary concern is really making sure the vehicles have time to slow down and the emergency vehicle access. And when we go through these projects, the fire marshal will kind of have the final say. And so, we'll need to make sure that a larger fire truck can be accommodated within the Wonerf and deploy quickly, right? So it may be that the fire truck doesn't want to come all the way into the Wonerf. Maybe it will stop within that transition zone. And we just want to make sure that we are covered there. But I'm not really sure that our trucks are that long. So I'm going to defer to Director Hausch to see if he wants to add some more thoughts to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just will, first of all, I give credit to Autumn and consulting planner Joel Galbraith, who was here for coming up with this idea and then proposing and running with it. It was all our staff. And I'm very much thankful to the council for supporting the idea and pushing us to make the ordinance as good as it can be, and the community. So the whole point of that stopping distance is safety. This is a new concept. Folks in the United States aren't really used to this idea. I think some people are going to, pull off of these arterial roads and kind of be it'll be a learning process for new folks entering that area. So that's the whole goal of that kind of transition zone. And to Councilmember Ford's point, that transition zone does come from one of the only Wonerf ordinances that we could find. I believe that one comes from Anchorage, Alaska's ordinance. So we did not have the benefit of a traffic engineer providing input on this ordinance. And so to that point, we are looking for some examples on what that safety distance would be. I absolutely hear the comments from the Planning Commission and the community. But safety, because it's so new, I think one way to address that might be to reduce it by 10 feet and go with 50. I think that would address some of the stopping distance that Mayor Landman pointed out that are documented information that we can get, maybe reduce it a little bit to address some of the other points. And We do have the benefit of our city manager being a city engineer in his past, and so he may want to add some comments to that.
I'll see if the city manager has anything he'd like to add first, or I come back to the council.
Well, I don't have anything magical, but it may be helpful. So just for reference, I believe the fire trucks, like your typical fire trucks, are about 40 feet long.
Yeah.
And that isn't the crazy, like, big ladder trucks. That's your kind of normal fire truck. And for some local reference, since we are talking a lot about East Cotati, Lipton Way, that's about from the kind of the face of curb on East Cotati to the alleyway, roughly midpoint in the alleyway is about 70 feet. So maybe that gives you some frame of reference for like what 60 feet might be. So that's 70 feet, that section right there. Daiquisto is Daiquisto again from the face of curb on East Cotati to sort of the first edge of the first house's driveway is about 40 feet. Actually, Kevin, can you actually, can I share screens real quick? Oh, geez. All right. So you can see, this is what I was talking about. This is Lipton here in East Cotati. It's about 70 feet from this face of this curb to the, just basically the alleyway here. So that gives you kind of a frame of reference. And then here's another one on Daiquisto just down the way. Again, face of this curb to this edge of the driveway, first house. That's about 40 feet. So your typical fire truck's going to pull in, and you want to get it out of East Cotati for sure. Have physical space to get out of East Cotati, plus a little bit of space would probably be recommended. But I think as projects come in, they would have to be, as Noah said, you're going to have a traffic engineer, and you're also going to have Rancho Adobe Fire District providing input on what they think they need there, if it gets that close to an arterial. And it is a minimum, that what's in the code is a minimum. So that would just be the starting point for a conversation. It could be potentially a little bit longer, if it's required by a traffic engineer or Rancho Adobe. So I guess that's just a long way of saying that 40 feet is basically would just fit a fire truck. So probably in my opinion, it might be it'd be better to be a little bit bigger than that. I think Noah was suggesting 50 feet. That would probably be a little bit better. 60 feet, I don't know if that's necessary, but it could always get longer if it's needed for safety reasons. Longer than 50.
So since you've gone to fire department stuff, I'm going to jump in for a second, if I might, before I start calling on the council. Certainly not the fire marshal here, and definitely nothing magical, but I can tell you a couple of things that I do know in practice. City manager and staff are correct. If there's a working fire, heaven forbid, in one of these buildings, given the narrowness of a fire truck probably isn't going to pull all the way down there. They will park a little outside and extend lines down there, but they will get comfortably close. And some of the things I want you to think about is, yes, you have a 40-foot vehicle, but it's just not the vehicle. Number one, usually they've picked up a hydrant, which means rather large 4 or 5 inch hose going either into the back or the side or potentially the front of the unit. That takes some space for that to turn. It can't be turned on a dime. It's rather large. Then the next thing often for fire attack is they'll be pulling hose lines off and extending them and accessing whether it's a ways down the Vernip or perhaps going immediately right or left. But that easily can add another 10, 15 feet. So I could live with 50. I would be very uncomfortable with 40 because I don't think it serves that function. And given that this is a new thing and we want it to work and it's new to the American public, I think the extra 10 feet might be well worth it if my colleagues agree. That's all I wanted to put forth. So I'm going to go right to Councilmember Ford because I see his hand up.
Thanks, Mayor Lemon. I could certainly live with the 50. I'm fine with that. And I had a thought in thinking about the other two arterials that I think most of our design standards don't want private driveways to come right off of those arterials anyway, right? We have them build other streets for the housing to load off of. So I'm skeptical that this will be a big issue except along East Cotati. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong though on this, but my perception is we intend for housing developments to load onto other streets that would then feed into those two arterials.
Well, I do see because the majority of those arterial oriented properties are going to be for mixed use and multifamily housing, which you generally do enter into a private drive aisle of some type. So I do see some potential for it to be there. It's not going to be public streets primarily on these, generally just given the size of the parcels we have and the types of projects we're going to get on those larger streets, I believe.
So that those parcels north of 116, south of Lowe's, those would all be private streets in there?
So the projects, we have projects in right now, we're looking at them, and right now nothing is proposed as a public street. We're kind of having discussion. Maybe the West Cotati realignment might be just because it's going to provide public access to a park, but it's still being discussed.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I will say too on Highway 116, we're actively trying to consolidate access points. There's not so to the extent that we can do that, we try to do that in developments.
All right. I'll ask if there's any further comment or questions from the council. I see a hand from Councilmember Sparks. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just the same comment as before, but I was hoping to get a staff perspective on, is there a way to clarify the wording regarding that we're not trying to maximize overall Von square footage, but just as a proportion of the paved internal driveways?
Yes. Oh, so I apologize that that may have missed my attention earlier for response. Yes. I was thinking that, that perhaps we could add just a little caveat there in that section that says, to the extent that additional driveway area within the development is not increased as a result of the WUNRF requirements. So if you guys want to wordsmith that a little bit, but I can try writing that down.
I think that would be great. And as Mayor Landman said, maybe it's not necessary, but it would make me feel more comfortable if we just clarified it a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I'll just push again, perhaps we could simply say we're asking to maximize Vernus to the planned and necessary internal driveway and not asking to maximize driveways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I agree, that is the concept. We want to make sure it's clear. Clarity is never bad. Councilmember Ford.
I liked your wording there. I want to be careful not to give developers a way to say, well, if I make it a WUNRF, then I have to build in some seating, and that's going to take away a parking space. So now I need more space. Right? I mean, there is a if we say without increasing driveway space at all, that could give a way to say, well, then there's no way to build a WUNRF. And so I think it takes a little care to phrase it. It currently says internal driveways shall be designed to maximize the total WUNRF square footage to create additional amenities. I'm not sure the right phrase.
Well, we've had a few good suggestions. We have directed staff to see if they can clarify that a little further. I think we're not in a bad place to start. Perhaps we can agree to just let staff further clarify that. I think we've given them pretty of direction, even if we haven't hit on the magic combination of words just yet. I'm seeing some nodding heads to that. Anything further from the council tonight on this? If not, then I'd be happy to see somebody move adoption of the resolution. Councilmember Ford, I see your hand.
I move adoption of the resolution with the understanding that the transition zone for arterials will change to 50 feet and with appropriate rewording of the maximize WUNRF space clause.
Thank you, Mr. Ford.
I'll second
Do we have a
that.
second? And a second from the Vice Mayor. All right, if we could have, can I see Mr. Bacher has his hand up. Please go ahead, Mr. Bacher.
Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, the motion was to adopt the resolution, but I think the intention is to introduce the ordinance, correct?
Excuse me, that is
Yes,
correct.
introduce the ordinance. You're right. I said introduce resolution, but there is no resolution. Introduce the ordinance. Thank you.
And I'm sure the Vice Mayor is going to accept that amendment.
Yes.
Pretty darn sure of that. Thank you, Mr. Bacher. Now for sure, we will go and see if we can have a roll call vote.
Councilmember Sparks,
Yes.
Councilmember Ford,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Mayor Landman.
And yes. All right, we have Vuners in Katahdin. I think it's a very good thing. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, staff. So this leads us now to our regular agenda, and the first is item A. And this is public consideration of the draft 6-cycle housing element during the 30-day public review period. And I'm going to go to the staff report, but I do want to point out that agenda item is essentially notification to the public of the opening of the comment period. We can, of course, intend to and can take comments from the public, and the council can certainly make comments, but this isn't the final adjudication of this issue tonight. This will go to the state first, then it comes back to Planning Commission and us for that final review. So I just wanted to clarify that. I think it's obvious from the staff report, but I thought it would be good to clarify it. So with that, I'll ask if we can have our staff presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Landman, members of the council. And just really quick, as my PowerPoint comes up, I wanted to touch on the kind of innovative ordinances that we've been doing here at staff, or here in Katahdin. Our staff had the benefit of attending the American Planning Association conference just last week in Anaheim. It was the first one they've held in 3 years. It was really exciting. One of our planning commissioners was able to get down and attend with us. But I had asked Senior Planner John Paul Harries to help me present the cottage housing ordinance, because I did think that was a fairly innovative ordinance that would be well received for some of the other small and medium-sized cities. And we presented a standing room only crowd. So it was very well received. And I've already pitched a presentation for next year's conference to Associate Planner Autumn Buss. So Vuners will be spreading throughout the state if we can do anything about it. And getting into my presentation, as the mayor identified, this is the introduction and of the draft 2023 housing element update for the 30-day public review and comment period. No actions being taken. The intent of this presentation is just to highlight that the draft is available for public review, and that we would really appreciate hearing from the public on the draft document. We'll go to the next slide. So just to give some background, since really 2017, the state legislature has really been changing housing and planning laws affecting the development process. They've changed our application processes. Housing Accountability Act made some by right processes that take exempt process or housing projects from CEQA. We cannot downzone properties anymore. There's inclusionary requirements, ADUs, as you all are well aware. You've been kind of on the cutting edge of all those laws with us. But in 2019, we started trying to talk about these things to the community and the council, and some of you were able to attend our housing workshop that we presented in 2019, October, almost 3 years ago today. I think it's 3 years ago tomorrow to the day that we had that workshop. And then we did a survey just to hear from people about what their housing needs and goals were in the community, knowing that we were going to be moving into this process and just how many changes were kind of in the mix. We did some additional surveys over, that winter, the following winter. And then in 2020, the fall of 2020, we really got into the RHNA process and then got our RHNA allocation granted to us. And then we formally kicked off the housing element update 1 year ago tomorrow. And we've been working with our consultant, 4Leaf, and a couple other consultants on engagement, the document itself, and CEQA. And today we are here kind of, not quite in the middle of the 30-day public review process, which is required under the law. And we'll go to the next slide. Here's some fun slides, just kind of taking us back through that legislative process. If you were at that workshop that we presented, we showed this slide showing all the regulations that we were trying to navigate and deal with. And some of those will look very familiar to you. And then we'll go to the next slide, which shows all the things that were on the docket in March of this year related to housing. Staff has been struggling to keep up with this. But then luckily the next slide shows what actually got adopted this year. So it was a significant reduction in all the bills that got passed. But needless to say, there was some significant pent-up demand as we navigated through the COVID process and the pandemic. And so there is, as we all know, housing is the top issue for the state, and all of our communities and throughout the state are trying to struggle with it. So the next slide just kind of shows that we've been in a little bit of a legislative frenzy, and that's how we feel here in the Community Development Department, trying to react and respond to all of those laws. But then we'll just go to the next slide and kind of summarize where we are with the housing element update itself and some of the themes and the trends that we've been working on. Generally, we've really just been trying to, continue on the successes that we've been making with our current element. You'll see on, and I'm sorry, my packet page that I have is not accurate, but in the around packet page, well, I'm not even going to try to say because I know it'll be wrong. Sorry, I'm going from my Planning Commission packet notes. There are a summary of the 2015 housing element programs, and generally we feel we've been able to be fairly successful with implementing those, and those programs have been fairly successful to address the housing issues that they were intended to do. And so the theme of this is really trying to build on those, continue those efforts, identify new challenges, which are primarily informed by extensive amounts of research that's located in the technical background report, and move forward with clarified objectives to how to address both the past programs and issues that we identified and new ones that came out of that technical background report and all of the outreach and input we've received to date. There's a continued emphasis and response to the objective and by right housing mandates, while also trying to balance the local character that we've talked about as we brought some of those ordinances together. Obviously, trying to meet the numerous mandates that were summarized in those bills that we talked about just in the previous slides, while also maintaining our access to funding. The state keeps moving the grant funding requirements and kind of your priority and how that funds are allocated to your compliance with some of the housing mandates that they're pushing down. Obviously, the Department of Housing and Community Development in the state, their authority over our housing element and their oversight has significantly increased. And so we're responding to that, knowing that we will be submitting this document to them and they will be telling us whether it's adequate or not to meet the needs of the city based on their perspective at the state level. We wanted to thoughtfully reuse some of our opportunity parcels that maybe were in the fifth element and just didn't develop, but still are from our perspective, the best locations for how we're going to meet our future housing needs. But that was a bit of a threading the needle because there are a lot of regulations regarding how you reuse those properties. And obviously we're going to show how we can meet our RHNA with those properties and exceed it, because we are required to build in a buffer with the planning exercise that the housing opportunity sites are. You essentially are trying to show how you can accommodate your RHNA at all the various income levels that are required. And then also respond to the ongoing reporting requirements in our annual production report, which we'll present to the council every year in February or March, and then turn into the state in April, which is now required for both the RHNA process, so housing, and then the general plan itself. Cotati and our department have not been up to date with our general plan reports. We are playing catch up a bit. We will get all of those buttoned up into the council, kind of showing how we are, our status on responding to all of the general plan programs and policies. And then we'll be able to keep up with that annually as required under the law. And we'll go to the next slide. So again, as Mayor Lemon correctly identified, this is just intended to raise awareness of the housing element update process and try to generate some comments. Our engagement folks at the Civic Edge have set up a Cotati specific email, cotati@thecivicedge.com, where we're asking people to send their email comments. They can mail them to City Hall. They can walk in written comments. They can send them to me at my email. Any of those ways is fine, but we are trying to funnel folks in directly to that address to kind of streamline and facilitate the process. At the end of the 30-day comment period, October 27th, we have a 10-day response period built into the legislation. We'll try to respond to those comments, document them, and then we submit to HCD for a 90-day review process. The goal of HCD's review is to identify any areas where we've fallen short in our policies and programs to meet our housing needs. Hopefully we don't get too many comments along those lines. And the public can still send comments directly to the Department of Housing and Community Development during that 90-day review period, and they have their own direct email address set up, housingelements@hcd.ca.gov. And if anybody's interested in doing that, they should include Cotati housing element in the subject line of the email. At the end of that process, HCD will give us a letter and identify anything that they found is deficient. We will provide a response to it, amend our draft to address those shortfalls. Concurrent with that, we're conducting the environmental review and finalizing that draft. And then we take it through the decision-making process. Like any other planning document, it goes to the Planning Commission at a public hearing. So there will be more opportunities for the public to provide input. Right now, we're tentatively targeting February 20th or March 6th. Those dates are tentative right now, but that's where we're gaming out based on the schedule that's in front of us. And then we bring that to the City Council with the Planning Commission recommendation, conceptually targeting March 14th or March 28th. Those dates may move, but generally that's the time that we will be before the council. And assuming everything goes according to this slide, we will have a certified housing element around those timeframes. And so Jane Riley has been able to join us to assist me with any technical questions. But if we go to the next slide, there is a recommendation from the Community Development Department that they apologize that it says Planning Commission. This is the City Council. We talked to the Planning Commission last night. Review the 2023 draft housing element and technical background report, identify any concerns or direction, take public comment, and file the report for our future discussion at a public hearing. And I'm available for questions, as is Ms. Riley.
All right, well, let's just see if we have any questions. And right away, I see a hand from Mr. Ford. Go ahead.
Quick question. In that 10-day period following the 30-day public comment, that's for city response, is it like, can you revise on the basis of public comment during that 10 days? Or is this like this draft is going through the 30 days and then going to HCD?
Jane, can you speak to that a little bit about that process?
Of course. Yes, we have a minimum of 10 days during which we must respond to public comments and either incorporate them into the housing element or indicate why we did not incorporate them into the housing element. So it's truly an iterative process.
I see. Thanks.
Interesting. Councilmember Sparks.
Thank you. I just have one question. It's related to, it's on packet page 205, which for Mr. Hausch, I think is page 50.
Yep, correct. I have it.
Program 3.1. As I was preparing for this meeting tonight, I just had kind of our draft that we had on June 14th at our workshop open side by side with this new draft to see what changes there were. And it looked like program 3.1 had several changes to it. And so I was just wondering if you could maybe walk us through what changed in that program, and because there were several things that were different.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just reviewing right now. And I will say, you know, Ms. Riley is in a very unique spot to be processing multiple housing element updates in Southern California, where they've already gotten their letters and had to thread the needle of complying with HCD, and also working in the Northern California jurisdiction. So it could be that her experience informed these changes. I'm sorry, just let me read it for a bit.
So this
program is Sparks. I wonder if it would be helpful, Councilmember Sparks. You clearly have put some deep insight into this. Could you point out what you see as the key changes that you wanted to ask about, and that might help them focus, save us a little time?
Well, sure. There was an addition of residential care facilities for 7 to 10 clients, which was just inserted. And then I was having trouble wrapping around my own head around it, which is why I asked. It just looked like several of the bullet points either got combined or
So yeah, so I can speak to that. So
lost.
there's state laws regarding our residential care facilities and how we have to process them, and our current code is non-compliant with that. I think we identified that through the review process since we last talked. And then to your point, we are looking to consolidate and combine and simplify programs where possible. To just make them more easily understood and implemented, and also to make it easier to hold ourselves accountable to how we meet those programs. And then Ms. Riley, if you'd like to add anything.
Thanks. No, that's exactly right. Because every single program requires a structured reporting and output to HCD every single year, as well as to the City Council through the annual progress report or annual production report, as NOAA calls it. We try to really cut down the number of programs. And so we put everything that has to do with amending the code into this one program. And we have a time frame with some of the things where we have to do it to be compliant with existing state law. The state requires that we do that right away. So that'll be 2023. Frankly, you've already done some of the things that are in here. We have to amend the remaining land use regulations by June of 2024. Again, HCD wants to see everything within the first 2 years if it's what they consider a priority project, and then complete the required rezonings by 2026, which will be consistent with both the requirements of state law and with the specific plan amendments coming up. As Noah spoke to, so there are a couple of things that are specific that we have identified through letters that we're getting in Southern California for SCAG jurisdictions from HCD. One of them is for that residential care facility, so that's where that one came from. And then some of the other ones have been either identified with previous letters, so we went back and looked through this element knowing that we would see the same things in subsequent letters. And we've either grouped some things together or broken some things down into specific elements so that HCD will be sure to recognize them.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification.
All right, and I see next we'll go to Vice Mayor Hard.
Thank you, Mayor. One is a comment on the housing element review from 2015. In that lessons learned, you talk about the high cost of land and construction made it a challenge for the city to reach all of its programs. We also, and it was mentioned in another section later in the document, but we also were hit in 2017 with all the fires, which while that exasperated the costs of things, it also became as a region more important that those resources, which were extremely scarce from a labor perspective, really moved towards getting people that were displaced because their houses burned down. So that's not really mentioned, but I think for our region, that's kind of an important aspect, that those resources were needed elsewhere. So, you know, that was just a comment on that. And then for the sake of everyone, so this goes to HCD. We have responses. You guys respond. Then it comes before the Planning Commission and the City Council. But since HCD will have already made a determination and you will have responded, realistically, if we get public comments at Planning Commission and City Council, if they are contradictory to what HCD has asked us to do, really what is the leeway there in taking those comments and what can we really do? I think that that's important for folks to know since it's already been to HCD. So
Riley, can you speak to that just with your experience?
That's a great question. And on one that's worrisome for elected officials, right? Why is this in front of us if there's nothing we can do about it? So the answer is, and I hate to do this, it depends. We hope that we will get a letter of conditional certification from HCD before we come to you. And the letter would essentially say, if you do all these things, we will certify your housing element. It would follow discussions that they would be having with staff. So we would have a good idea of what was and what isn't negotiable for them. In the most recent letters that they've been sending out that do that, they identify priority programs that they're really going to be the new office of what do they call it? Enforcement.
I think it's the
office.
Ministry of Love.
Yes, that's what we'll call it. Melinda Coy's new office has been identifying those things in the most recent letters. And if we're fortunate enough to get a letter that identifies those things, either the programs we're going to be watching, those would be the things that you would be in trouble if you moved to change some of those things in your final adoption.
Okay. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. I just want, the public and the council for that matter to be aware that there may be only a limited amount of things that we actually can change. It's not like it's not like an ordinance where we have, more leeway. We have to fit within the confines of HCD. So
and most of the things that you're not going to have a choice on are going to be statutory matters anyway.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you, Mayor.
Certainly. Yeah, just a couple of comments. Not much to say other than congratulations, staff. I had understood this to be a huge undertaking. I remember it previously as a huge undertaking. It is much bigger than I remember, and kudos for that to everybody involved. That's obvious to me. Regarding particularly some of the points the Vice Mayor brought up, I find it very disheartening that what we are forced into now is what the state wants, not what the public may well ask for. But that's where we're at right now for the moment. So that's what it'll be. And I'll just say in general about that, and many, not all, but many of the new requirements from the state, I think that your slide, no, was unfair to sharks, but at least it was very illustrative of where we're at right now. So with that, speaking of public comment, let's see if we have any public comment on this tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. Speaking to our attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use your raise hand icon. Mayor Landman, that will end public comment.
All right, thank you. We'll bring it back to the council. So this is not an action item. I'll just check in once and see if anybody has anything else they'd like to add in this. And I do see one hand from Councilmember Sparks.
Thank you. And is this the appropriate time to give feedback on this draft, or how does staff want to receive that feedback? Would you like us to email it in, or?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, so we've taken a lot of time to gather input through the previous meetings. I really want to say thank you to Ms. Riley. This meeting was not in any of our agenda or any of our schedule. She attended this. It's not even in the budget for her consulting contract. But so we just really felt it was important to raise awareness to the public. So it kind of depends, I guess, on how you were hoping to comment. And I hadn't even thought about this. Because at this point, I guess making significant changes have the potential to be concerning.
Sure.
Where we are. So
I can clarify it.
Not an action item tonight, too, so we don't want to segue into that.
I'm not interested in making any significant changes, just some changes to the way that the report is presented in a few places.
I would love to get that in writing, especially if you have like wording changes, it would be super helpful to get that in writing.
I will send that to you in writing.
That's okay with Noah.
Absolutely. I was going to suggest the same if Ms. Sparks can take the time, Councilmember Sparks.
Certainly. Thank you.
And I'm going to look one more time. I don't see any hands. So with that, thank you, everybody. And thanks again to staff. And thank you, Ms. Riley, for being here tonight and answering questions along the way. You've done that for me, and I know you've done it for others. And I certainly appreciate that, because this is a complex and at times difficult thing. And the fact that you're juggling multiple ones of these impresses me very much. So with
That's all I do.
Well, doing much more would be difficult, I'd have to say. So next, we're going to move to item B on our regular agenda, 12B. And this is an updated COVID-19. And let's jump to the printout. So we're going to have a presentation, and the recommendation is for three things: that we review current COVID health orders, that we adopt a motion directing staff to align city COVID policies with state and local health orders, and also discuss timing to resume in-person public meetings. So with that, I'll jump right to the staff presentation.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So just brief background for anyone, everyone here I think knows, but I'll be brief with it. In August of last year, there was a series of county health orders that required testing, weekly testing and public safety. And at that time, the council had a conversation about that and directed that not just public safety, but all staff would fall, into that health order guideline. And effectively, that was requiring any unvaccinated employees to test weekly, and also there's separate orders requiring wearing of face masks indoors if you're unvaccinated. That wasn't a particular council mandate. That was just a health order mandate at the time. But those were incorporated into our city illness and injury prevention plans and guidelines around COVID. So at the same time, the year before in 2020, Cal OSHA also adopted emergency temporary standards for workplace control of COVID. Those are they've been revised several times through COVID. They're still in effect. Their emergency temporary standards remain in effect until the end of this calendar year. And that's the bulk of our health and safety policies for city employees, is driven by the Cal OSHA ETS requirements, overlaid by the local health orders, and then any local council policy. So in September of this year, the county health department, in alignment with the state Department of Public Health, dropped weekly testing and masking requirements in most settings. So attached to the staff report, it has some of the changes that occurred in September, and sort of the shorthand version is that the masking and some of those the stricter requirements are primarily only required at this point in healthcare settings or high risk settings like nursing homes and that type of thing. There is no longer generally in workplaces a requirement to do any sort of testing or even mandatory masking. Although an indoor masking is still a recommendation. I think that's probably going to remain a recommendation for a while, but it is not a mandate and hasn't been for a little while now. And the last bit, just on the COVID piece of this, is that as the legislative session ended recently, the governor signed a law which extended supplemental COVID sick leave to the end of the calendar year. So that was due to expire September 30, but for a variety of reasons, I think maybe the most obvious reason is that the Cal OSHA ETS standards go to the end of the calendar year. So they extended the COVID sick leave policy to the end of the year. Aside from that, so the recommendation, as the mayor read off, is to just update our internal workplace policies to just align with the county and state health orders, and then continue that moving forward. So that's, and the main change there would be just the weekly testing would drop, because that was a local health order requirement that went away, and is the only thing really remaining. The other things that would happen as we move, if the council decides to do this tonight, is we have signs up throughout City Hall that say, masks are required if you're unvaccinated to come into City Hall. The restrooms are locked for anyone other than staff. We would change the signs, basically saying masking is recommended, and reopen the restrooms for the public. So that's sort of the totality of the changes that would occur if council decides to move forward with this. So that's one thing. So the other thing in this item was about discussing the timing of resuming in-person meetings. In the staff report, there's a table that shows kind of where everyone is, just as a point of reference in terms of other city councils in Sonoma County. And I was actually surprised at the variety of different things that people are doing. It's not really super clear cut in all cases, but I would say in general, and this is summarized in the staff report, but I'd say in general, most of the cities are in person, or at least partially in person at this point. Some cities allow some council members to be hybrid, either it seems like on a meeting by meeting basis, or maybe in some cases they're hybrid on a longer term basis at this point. But most city councils are at this point in person. In terms of public participation, so most city councils allow for both in-person and virtual public attendance. There's a couple exceptions. And the one really interesting one is that Rohnert Park is the only city in the county that doesn't allow people to attend virtually. They're in person and in person only, both for council and for the public. So it's just an interesting outlier, but everyone else seems to allow hybrid for, I think, and I think that would be, as we move to, as the council decides to move to in-person, that would definitely be, my recommendation is that we allow a hybrid option for the public, because it seems like that's a good, just my own observation is in general, our meetings have been, I think, better attended with hybrid than in general when they were just in person only prior to COVID. So, the other consideration for in-person meetings is that we are working on some furniture stuff in the council chambers, and I think the soonest that we could be ready would be November. But that's on the front end. On the back end, there's been some state law changes, so we've been operating under AB 361, which is the state law that allows virtual meetings for when there's an emergency, a declared emergency. And that law will still remain in effect, but at least until the end of, I think, 2023. But then there's also AB 2449, which was just adopted by the governor, that will go into effect in January 1, which adds a whole nother set of different requirements for virtual meetings, making them much more complicated to administer. And basically, the shorthand is that to be virtual, and I'm talking about council members, to be virtual under AB 2449, it's either through a just cause or an emergency finding. Just cause would be announcing that at a regular meeting ahead of the absence or the in-person absence. Or in the emergency provision would require the council to vote on that to allow that provision to go into effect. And there's limits on how often the council member can be absent from the meeting. It just becomes much more complicated. So I'm not entirely clear yet on AB 361 versus AB 2449 and how exactly they play together, because, like I said, AB 361 is still in effect, but then AB 2449 seems to supersede it in many ways. So there's that, or there's the traditional Brown Act teleconferencing requirements, which is sort of old school Brown Act, which is if you're not going to be physically present, you can, on the face of the agenda, you can post the location of the remote meeting. And you have to, if you're, let's say you're remote somewhere, you're on vacation, but you want to Zoom in for a meeting, then you would have to post it at your hotel room also, so that if anyone were remote, they could join you. And this just harkens back to the old day of telephone only teleconferencing, because that was before the public could join via a platform like Zoom. So there was some logic to it. If you wanted to participate in a meeting in in Europe, and someone followed you to Europe to hang out and they want to be in the meeting, then then the only way they could participate, because it's a direct, one-to-one connection to the council meeting through that remote phone call, is you'd have to be in the room with them. That's not the way it is anymore. Obviously, with Zoom, you can come in from anywhere as long as it's published. The Zoom credentials are published. So it doesn't make as much sense in today's environment, but that option is still available for council members that can't meet the just cause or emergency conditions exemptions to participate remotely. So suffice it to say, it just gets much more complicated come January 1. And we'll work through what the 2449 differences are and how they overlap with 361 so that we're clearer on that before we get to January 1, but it becomes more complicated. So on the front end, we couldn't do it any sooner than sometime in November, and you probably want to do it before you hit January 1. It seems like, in just my opinion, just as a suggestion for discussion, a sweet spot might be shooting for the December 13th meeting, both because it's before the end of the year and also that's the council transition and there's a lot of, it may be a good opportunity to have an in-person meeting and get back into it at that point. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
All right, with that segue, let's see where the council's at. Any questions before we go to public comment? Not seeing any question. I do see one from the vice mayor. Please go ahead.
Yeah, when I read this, Damien, it's interesting the way you explained it on the just cause, you know, that you have to let people know in advance. But when you look at the way the bill defines it, so one of the definitions is that you don't have childcare for that night. Well, you wouldn't necessarily know that a meeting before to be able to notify the council ahead of time. Same with that you have a contagious illness that prevents you from attending. I mean, the emergency versus just cause seem both the same because just cause implies that you tell the council ahead of time. An emergency is something where the council actually has to vote on. Is that?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it and then maybe City Attorney Walker could weigh in. But so the emergency provision and the just cause seem to have some overlap on them. So that's a point of like bit of confusion right now as we're trying to figuring out what controls. But and I might have misspoke on the just cause. It may not have to be in advance, but it has to be announced at a regular meeting. And so perhaps, and this is where maybe the city attorney may have some input, perhaps that could be right at the start of the meeting that you're participating in remotely. I'm not sure. I'm still trying to figure out all the details of that bill, but it gets complicated, more complicated.
Okay, and then secondly, it's your understanding, and I guess Mr. Bacher can talk to this too. It still does not, as you understand it with all these bills overlaying, that we can still use the original Brown Act where we actually post an address and allow that agenda to be posted and still participate remotely.
That's my understanding, that we still could use the sort of old school Brown Act teleconferencing rules if that's because a lot of times when you're gone, you're not going to fall into the just cause or emergency provisions. And so, you know, the old style Brown Act would be, I think, needed.
Well, they're very, I mean, the just cause ones that are listed in there are really very specific and don't really handle, as you said, you know, say you're on vacation and you want to participate because you can make the time available to be there. None of that is incorporated into the definition that was very strict of that. So either we have to be able to go back to the old method, or what they're saying is that we can't participate, period, if you're on vacation.
Yeah, so the old way is left in place. The new legislation is intended to be apparently a new approach. And this is all still a little murky to me. I've read this several times. I'm going to have to dig into the legislative history to really figure it out. But it seems to give individual council members the right to do virtual meetings on short notice and, you know, when they have an emergency right at the beginning of the meeting. But there are a bunch of strict restrictions. But the old way it stays in place, and AB 361 stays in place as well.
Okay.
So that's how I understand it. We're continuing to review this, and we'll have an update for our clients at some point in the near future.
Well, that's good to hear because that was really concerning to me. You know, I sometimes am not physically here, but I always make myself available to be able to participate. And it would be really not a good thing moving forward that the public can virtually attend whenever they want, wherever they want, yet council members can't. So that seemed to be moving in the wrong direction from where I sit. So thank you for that. Thank you, Mayor.
Certainly, Vice Mayor. Well, I think we're all grateful for the clarity that the state's provided on this tonight. I can see that across all of our faces, so that's helpful. So with that, I'll ask if there's no questions, I'll jump to public comment, and then we can bring it back to wrestle our way through this. No further questions. Let's go to public comment. We do have a couple of attendees still.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. Speaking to our attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon. Mayor Landman, that will end public comment.
All right, so we'll bring this back. So we've already reviewed the current COVID health orders. So next, as we do our comments, I'd like to know from each of you if we're comfortable adopting a motion directing staff to align city COVID policies with the state and local health orders. I would expect we will be, but we should hear that from each of us. And then I'd love to hear from you your thoughts and timing to resume in-person public meetings. Evidently, we can be ready to go as soon as, I guess, a month from now, the first meeting in November. And I believe we are fortunate enough to be in a position to be able to offer hybrid meetings too, which I think is a benefit. So at any rate, I'll see who would like to speak first on this and share their thoughts. Don't all rush at once. So there we go. All right. And as soon as I said that, your hands went up, bing, bing, bing. And so I believe you went up in this order, Councilmember Ford, Vice Mayor Harvey, and Councilmember Sparks, but it was very close.
So thank you. I'm comfortable with aligning our COVID policies with state and county guidelines. As to us going back in person, I hope we can be back in person by the December meeting when the new members are seated and sworn in. I would be comfortable returning at the first November meeting. So that's where I'm at. Thanks.
All right. Vice Mayor Harvey.
Yes, I'm comfortable with aligning the orders with the state and local. And my preference, I think it would be good for the new council members coming in and the old council members that will not be with us, for us to have our maiden voyage, if you will, on our December meeting. That would, I think, work out well for all concerned. So that's my thoughts.
All right, thank you. And Councilmember Sparks.
Yes, I'm comfortable aligning our ordinance with the public health new standards. And yes, I think December 13th would be a really nice time to go back face to face. I would also be comfortable doing it sooner, but knowing that our second meeting in November is the week of Thanksgiving, I don't know if anyone's planning travel, so that's a consideration. All right, thank you.
All right, so yeah, I have to admit, I think I've been as cautious about this as anybody, or at least I believe I have been, but I've been watching numbers carefully and everything and looking at the examples where the other cities are at now, based again on numbers and not just what other people are doing. I think it's time for us to go back to live. I'm very pleased that our staff and our city has set us up so we can provide virtual. I think that's one of the few good things that came from the pandemic, certainly for the public, the recognition that being able to access some of these government meetings through virtual means is really beneficial at times for some people and allows slightly better participation, even if it is at times has its own challenges and can be a little clunky. I think it's well worth it. I personally would be comfortable going back for the first meeting in November. I heard that from Mr. Ford. I also heard my other colleagues say they were happy going into the first meeting in December. I would have been comfortable going on the meeting of the 22nd to split the difference, the classic council move. But let me ask staff, are we actually, on the 22nd, are we planning a meeting? What's going on with that? And how many days, remind me? Where is that sitting?
Yeah, we do have meetings planned for both days in November. And then, so that would be November 8th and 22nd. And then we have the final meeting of the year on December 13th.
So yeah, that's basically 2 days before Thanksgiving. So let me just ask now, do any of my friends plan to travel? Would this be problematic if we did choose to start at the end of November? Councilmember Ford.
I unfortunately don't plan that far ahead, but my understanding is through the end of this year, before 2449 kicks in, we have more flexibility in terms of virtual, because as long as we do the monthly declaration of emergency or whatever, so that somebody, even if we did go back in person, somebody who was traveling could participate virtually fairly easily this year. Is that correct?
Let's ask Mr. Bacher. Or
yes, that is correct. We would be able to maintain enough flexibility to allow a council member that happened to be away to participate remotely in that circumstance while the rest of the council is present in person. And some of my other clients already do that.
Okay. Well, if the council's amenable, are we comfortable then on settling on November 22nd? That gives staff a little extra time in their beginning of November that they were saying they might be ready, just to make sure that everything's set to go. But at the same time, then we're doing our part to provide as many options as possible for people now that it's the appropriate time to do it. I'm seeing some head nodding, some thumbs up. All right, so I think we have direction on that. The only thing I do need, I believe, is I need somebody to adopt a motion directing staff to align the city policy with COVID policies. It states here.
So moved.
Second.
And that was, see, by the end of the meeting, we get pretty snappy with this stuff. Thank you, Vice Mayor and Councilmember Ford. All right, can we have a roll call vote on that, please?
Councilmember Sparks?
Yes.
Councilmember Ford?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harvey?
Yes.
Mayor Landman?
And yes, so that carries with 4 and 1 absent, which I should have been mentioning earlier tonight. All right. So that concludes our regular agenda and brings us now to the city manager's update. And we'll ask City Manager Obid to let us know what's going on here in Catani.
Well, I think, so I'll try to be brief. We have, just a reminder, we have a drug take back event on October 29th. We always can take prescription drugs at the police department. There's in the lobby there's a take back bin, but we're having the take back event here at the school, or the community center in the old school, 216 East School Street. And that's 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. That's a Saturday. So if you have any unused pharmaceuticals, bring them by, because we want to get them out of the landfills and out of the wastewater streams. We won again the Triple Crown for financial reporting. So that's huge. That means that we won all 3 awards from the Governmental Finance Officers Association, thanks to our Administrative Services Department and the great work that they do. So that's huge. It seems like it's almost becoming routine now, but it's definitely not routine. So great job to them to get that done. And then also for the street preservation project, the slurry seals and repairs have been completed, but there's going to be street striping, so the lane markings and that sort of thing are going to have to go down. And that's currently planned for next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So there will be some work around town on that. It's over 5 miles of streets, so they're going to be busy laying down stripes. Yeah. Also, I don't have a hard start date yet, but towards the end of October, we're anticipating that we will start to see the sewer main project start up. So the West Sierra sewer main project start up. That's between Olaf and Water Road. So just when one road project is done, another one is going to start up, which is going to cause traffic jams. So anyway, we'll try to be as good as we can about it, but it will be some inconvenience, I'm sure, for people. The pathway project is well underway. So the new pathways are laid down at McGinnis, between McGinnis and Marsh, and also the work at Pocket Park. So that's going on right now. And for events, we have Katati Candyland coming up on October 31st. So we have 20-something businesses already signed up for that. So it's going to be a big event centered around downtown in the Veranda Floody Ranch, where kids can trick or treat during the day on Halloween days. That's a Monday this year, while it's still light out. So it's 2 to 5, and mostly geared towards the little ones, but might be some bigger ones there too. We also, just before that, on October 24th, is a day off from school with the school district here. And if anybody needs childcare that day, we're running Camp Katati that day. And that's for ages 5 to 12, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And people can sign up online for that. And then so that's the 24th of October. On the 28th of October, we're hosting another Kids Night Out event at the community center. Again, this is ages 5 to 12. That allows grown-ups to have a child-free evening to run errands or go on a date or whatever they want to do from 5 to 9 p.m. And we feed the kids pizza, crafts, games, and movies. So it's another opportunity for parents. And then also on that same day, on October 28th, we have our last Fall Youth Day at Veranda Floody Ranch, which is hosted by our partners, Sandy Loam. And this is free, and it'll all be about Halloween, and will happen from 3:30 to 5 p.m. And we try to get people to RSVP so we know how many people we're getting. But we've gotten really big turnouts at these youth days that we've been holding. So it's been really successful, so it's good. And with that, I will just stop there, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Let's see if we have any questions tonight from the council. Council? I think you have so much going on, we're overwhelmed, and that's a good thing, Mr. Obed. Thank you. So for that, it's a perfect segue. We'll go from city manager report to city council member reports. And I'll ask my colleagues if they have anything they would like to report on tonight. Vice Mayor Harvey.
Yes, been busy on a couple of ad hoc committees. Nothing to report right now, but things are happening in our county. And then I was with actually most of the council attended the Jamie Lane ribbon cutting, and it was a very hot day, but it was so beautiful out there, and it was so wonderful to meet the new families and actually meet them inside their homes. They were just so excited. So that's just a great project, and I would love to see more of those projects. So hopefully we can do more, but great job, Mayor. Great job, staff. I mean, the whole group, it was just pretty incredible to hear the stories of the number of folks and groups that it took to make that happen. So I'm glad that those families are finally moving in. So thank you for that. That's all I have tonight, Mayor.
All right, I'll look to my other colleagues. I'm not seeing anything right now, so I will go ahead and give mine. I have 2 items to give, and I feel like Professor Farnsworth from Futurama, because I want to say good news, everybody, but I think they're both good news. First of all, you may remember back in the end of June this year, I asked if the council was willing to support SB 940 from LARD. We did support that. We also did ask the Sonoma County Mayors and Council Members Legislative Committee to support. And I want you to know that this was approved by the governor on September 28th. So that went through as we had hoped. The next step, as you may remember, is when Santa Rosa comes forward with an update to their rent stabilization ordinance. They have one much as we do. I had asked it, and there seemed to be some interest in us joining them. And the reason for this was that both of us use the San Francisco CPI as a basis for that rate that our lower income people in mobile homes are charged. But Santa Rosa, during the housing process update, actually discovered that San Francisco, who we base this on, uses 75%, not 100% of that CPI, as we do and as Santa Rosa does. So when that time comes, and I will not be here to help you with that, but I hope that my colleagues will keep an eye open for that and staff as well when the time is right to follow that direction, that Santa Rosa will help clear some of the potential legal hurdles for us, that we can do that, because I think it would be a good thing to do for the community. So I would ask you for that favor in the next year. I suspect from what I hear, you'll be busy, but if you can manage to get that done, that would be a very good thing. And lastly, as a result of our unveiling of our first in the region police EV patrol car, I did ask at the Regional Climate Protection Authority for us to agendize a discussion on it. And I'm happy to tell you that our meeting yesterday, it was agendized. We did discussed it, and we voted unanimously with representatives from all 9 cities and the Board of Supervisors present to put forth a resolution encouraging, supporting all jurisdictions in Sonoma County to agendize discussions to do 2 things. Number 1, commit to electrification of their fleets as they replace them, where suitable BEV replacements are available. And secondly, to also commit to charging those BEVs with local 100% renewable power. So hopefully this will be like the gas station ban, which we did roughly a year ago, and now just about everybody in the county is on board with that. That's really got critical mass in government terms quickly, and perhaps we can even do it quicker here. And your job, hopefully, if you choose to accept it, channeling a really old only Ben Ford smiled at that, and you probably only saw the reruns. But should you choose to accept it, would be once our county has enough people to make this notable, I would suggest we start working with our colleagues both at SETA and at SMART, where we have colleagues from Mendocino and Marin, and issue that friendly challenge. Hey, come on, join us. And once that happens, I suspect it'll be like the gas station game, which is now being picked up across the state and even outside the state. And these are the things that will help speed the adoption, help the public move quicker to make that transfer to electrification. I think it would be a very good thing. So happy to share that with you tonight. And that is all I had, other than a thanks for everybody involved with the ribbon cutting too. As the Vice Mayor said, that was very nice. And it was good to see both council members Ford, Sparks there as well. And other than being too hot, it was a wonderful time. So with that, let's see, we've completed council members, council member reports. I'm going to go to item 15, which is public comment on non-action items. I do see an attendee, so let's see if we have any comment.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. If you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon. Mayor Landman, that will end public comment.
All right, I'll next for item 16 ask the city manager if we have any information received after the agenda was posted.
No, Mayor, we discussed everything that you guys acted on today, so nothing new.
Perfect. Well, with that, what I'd like to do, if the council is willing, is adjourn tonight in appreciation. Appreciation for 50 years of glove repairs from Fran Fleet at Sandalady Glove Repair, a very long time Cotati icon. And I hope we could all agree to wish her the absolute best and thank her for everything she's made to the community. So with that and no objection, we are adjourned at 8:27. Thank you, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Good night.